The space around the quiet sector was silent, only the faint hum of a drifting transport ship echoed across the empty void. The ship's lights flickered weakly, showing signs of heavy strain. Inside its narrow corridors, an alien mother named Lyra held her small daughter close. The child was no older than 5 years by human measure, her large curious eyes filled with fear as the ship shuddered once more. Lyra whispered calming words, but her heart was racing. The enforcers would arrive soon. She had already seen their shadowed vessel closing in. They were here for her daughter, not for her. That thought crushed her spirit. She had begged them before, sending messages, offering herself in exchange, but they had ignored her pleas. Her daughter carried something rare, something the enforcers desired. Lyra had no way to fight them, only the strength to protect her child for as long as she could. The little girl clung to her mother's arm. "Will they hurt us?" she asked softly, her voice trembling like a whisper in the storm. "No, my light," Lyra replied quickly, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I will not let them." She pressed her forehead against the child's. Her words were brave, but deep inside she knew her power was too small against theirs. The ship jolted again as docking clamps seized hold of the hull. The sound of metal grinding against metal filled the cabin. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. They had arrived. The mother pulled her child behind a broken panel, trying to hide. The ship was dim, many corridors blocked by debris, yet she knew there was no real escape. Footsteps echoed from the main deck. Heavy boots struck the floor, followed by voices that carried cold authority. Lyra's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. She whispered, "Stay quiet, do not move." The voices grew louder. The enforcers walked with purpose, scanning each passage, searching for their prize. Lyra closed her eyes, preparing to reveal herself. Her thoughts swirled with fear, but above all with determination. If they demanded her child, she would step forward and beg once again. She would offer herself, her life, anything to save her daughter. Just as the sound of footsteps approached, another figure moved silently within the shadows. Hidden behind a damaged bulkhead, a human officer named Tomasz observed the scene. His patrol ship had been close when he detected the distress signal. He had come aboard to investigate, expecting to find wreckage or stranded travelers. Instead, he now saw a desperate mother shielding her child from armed intruders. Tomasz studied the situation carefully. The enforcers carried themselves with arrogance, confident that no one would challenge them. They had numbers and weapons, but they were not expecting interference. He could hear the mother's voice, trembling yet full of strength as she whispered to her child. The sound stirred something deep within him. The lead enforcer called out in a harsh tone. "We know you are here. Do not make this harder. Surrender the child and you will not suffer." Lyra's breath caught. She pressed her daughter closer to her chest. Her hands trembled, but her voice rose, filled with emotion. "She is only 5. Take me instead. Please, let her live." The corridor fell silent for a moment, broken only by the faint hum of the failing ship. The enforcers exchanged looks, their faces unreadable behind masks. They were unmoved. Tomasz clenched his jaw. He had seen injustice before, but never had it struck him so sharply. Something about the mother's plea, her selfless cry for her child, cut through the emptiness of space and reached his heart. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the shadows. His boots rang against the metal floor, drawing every eye toward him. The mother gasped softly, surprised to see a human appear. The enforcers stiffened, their weapons half raised, uncertain of his intent. Tomasz lifted his hand slightly, not in surrender but in calm defiance. His voice carried across the corridor, steady and firm. Enough. You will not take the child. The enforcers hesitated, not expecting interference from a lone human. Their leader spoke sharply, "This is not your concern. Step aside." Tomasz stood tall, his eyes unwavering. "It became my concern the moment I heard her beg for mercy. No child should be taken like this." His words were simple, but each syllable carried weight. He did not shout, yet his voice held power that filled the space. The alien mother looked at him with wide eyes. For the first time, she felt something new: hope. She had thought no one would stand against the enforcers. Yet here was a human, a stranger, placing himself between her daughter and those who sought to take her away. The child peeked out from behind her mother's arms. Her gaze settled on Tomasz, and though she was afraid, she felt a spark of safety in his presence. The lead enforcer stepped forward, his weapon raised slightly. "Do not test us, human. This is not your battle." Tomasz did not move aside. He kept his stance firm, his tone calm but unyielding. "Maybe not. But it is wrong. And I will not stand by while wrong is done." The corridor grew tense. The enforcers shifted uncomfortably, surprised by the boldness of one unarmed human. The mother's heart pounded as she held her daughter, watching the scene unfold. In that moment, the silence of the ship carried a new weight. No longer was it only fear and despair. Now, there was resistance. Now, there was the possibility of change. The enforcers regrouped, uncertain of their next move. The mother dared to breathe again, her eyes fixed on Tomasz. She did not know who he was or why he had chosen to help, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: he was the first light in her darkest hour. The child clung tighter to her mother, whispering softly, "Mama, who is he?" Lyra's voice shook, but a small smile touched her lips. "He is human," she whispered. "And he is here for us." The narrow corridor of the transport ship felt smaller with every breath. The air was tense, heavy with silence, as Tomasz stood between the enforcers and the alien mother with her child. His figure was calm yet steady, his posture telling the intruders that he would not move. The lead enforcer tilted his head slightly, his mask reflecting the faint light of the failing ship. His voice came cold and sharp. "Human, this is not your matter. Step aside and you will not be harmed. We only want the child." Lyra's heart trembled at those words. She pulled her daughter closer, pressing the little girl against her chest. She expected the human officer to step away, to choose safety for himself. Yet Tomasz remained rooted in place. His eyes locked on the enforcers with a quiet fire that did not waver. He spoke firmly. "She is a child. You will not touch her. If you want to pass, you will go through me first." The corridor grew still. The enforcers exchanged uneasy glances. They were trained to intimidate, to force compliance through fear. Yet the human did not show fear. His voice was not raised, but it carried strength that made them hesitate. The leader lowered his weapon slightly, studying him. "You cannot fight us all. Do you think your presence alone will change the outcome?" Tomasz answered without pause. "Sometimes one voice is enough to break silence. Sometimes one stand is enough to make others stop and think. I will not let you take her." His words carried into the dim air like an anchor. The alien mother looked at him with wide eyes, struggling to understand why the stranger would put himself in danger for her and her daughter. Among her people, Such selfless acts were rare. In her world, survival often meant sacrifice. Yet here stood a human, declaring protection for someone he did not know. The little girl peeked over her mother's arm, watching the tall figure who shielded them. In his stance she felt safety. Her small hand gripped her mother's sleeve tightly, but her eyes fixed on Tomasz with a growing sense of trust. The lead enforcer took another step forward, his boots echoing on the metal floor. His voice sharpened. Do not mistake your courage for power. You are alone, human. Alone you can do nothing. Tomasz shook his head slowly. You are wrong. Alone I can stand, and that is enough to tell the universe that this child matters. That is enough to tell her mother she is not without hope. You may not understand it, but I will not let fear rule this moment. For a brief instant, silence held all of them. Even the hum of the ship seemed softer. The enforcers shifted, unsure how to respond to words they were not used to hearing. Lyra felt her throat tighten. She had spent days fearing the moment when the enforcers would come, believing that she would face it with no one beside her. Now she found herself clinging to the presence of a human whose name she had only just learned. She whispered softly to herself, almost in disbelief. He stands for us. The leader finally raised his weapon again, unwilling to let words shake his mission. He spoke with frustration. Your defiance means nothing. We will take what we came for. Tomasz did not step aside. His voice remained steady, but this time it grew sharper with resolve. Then you will answer not only to me but to the laws you pretend to serve. Do you think no one will hear of this? Do you think humanity will look away? If you harm her, you will carry the weight of that choice. The mention of humanity gave the enforcers pause. Humans had earned a reputation across the stars, not just for strength but for persistence. They were known to remember promises and to defend what they claimed as right. To challenge one human was dangerous, but to challenge the spirit of all humanity was far greater. The enforcers lowered their voices, whispering to each other. Tomasz could not hear their words, but he could see their hesitation. He pressed his advantage, stepping forward slightly, his boots firm against the deck. I am not afraid of you. I am afraid only of silence when a child cries for help. And I will not be silent. The mother's eyes filled with tears that she did not let fall. Her daughter looked up at her with innocence, whispering softly, Mama, he will save us. Lyra held her child tightly, her heart pulled between fear and hope. She did not know if Tomasz could truly protect them against armed enforcers, but she felt the truth in his voice. He was different. He was not here for reward or gain. He was here simply because it was right. The leader of the enforcers finally lowered his weapon a fraction. His voice was cold, yet tinged with doubt. You risk your life for them. Why? Tomasz answered plainly. Because she is only 5. Because no child deserves to live in fear. And because humanity remembers what it means to protect the weak. The corridor grew still once more. The enforcers, though still holding weapons, no longer looked as certain as when they entered. Tomasz's stand had shaken the rhythm of their mission. The mother watched with silent awe, realizing that this moment would be remembered by her daughter for the rest of her life. This was more than defiance. This was a lesson written not with books or laws but with courage. As the silence stretched, Tomasz turned his head slightly toward Lyra and her child. His voice softened, just enough for them to hear. Do not be afraid. I am here. I will not leave you. The little girl's eyes widened, her small lips curving into the faintest smile despite her fear. She buried her face against her mother's shoulder, whispering, "He is strong, Mama." Lyra held her child close, her chest tight with emotion. She could not speak, but her eyes told Tomasz everything: gratitude, hope, and belief. The enforcers finally stepped back slightly, not yet retreating but no longer pressing forward. The balance of power had shifted. One human had changed the flow of the moment simply by refusing to move. And in that stand, in that unyielding refusal to let darkness claim an innocent child, the story of humanity once again lit a corner of the galaxy. The corridor of the damaged ship still echoed with tension. The enforcers stood in a loose formation, their weapons half raised but their confidence shaken. The alien mother, Lyra, held her daughter close, her arms wrapped tightly around the small figure who pressed her face into her shoulder. And before them stood Tomasz, a human officer whose voice had already shifted the balance of this encounter. The lead enforcer studied Tomasz carefully. His mask hid any expression, but his tone carried irritation. "You cannot protect them forever. You speak bold words, human, but you stand alone. Why place yourself in danger for a mother and child who are nothing to you?" Tomasz's eyes stayed firm. His voice was calm, deliberate, and steady. "They are not nothing. A child is never nothing. And sometimes one person is enough to hold back injustice." The enforcer tilted his head, unimpressed but wary. He motioned to his companions, signaling them to wait. He wanted to test this human with words before risking open conflict. "You claim to defend them, but you cannot change the order we follow. The girl is marked. It is her fate to be taken." Lyra flinched at the word fate. Her daughter pressed closer against her, too young to understand all the words but old enough to feel the weight of them. Tomasz's gaze shifted slightly toward them before returning to the enforcers. "Fate is not an excuse for cruelty. Rules can be bent. Orders can be questioned. You speak of authority, but even authority can be wrong." The enforcer narrowed his eyes behind the mask. Few dared to challenge them in such a way. Yet Tomasz spoke with conviction that could not be ignored. Seeing their hesitation, Tomasz pressed further. His voice grew stronger, each word measured. "If you take her, you do more than steal a child. You break the trust of every parent across the stars. You weaken your own standing. You think you gain power, but you will only lose respect. And respect is harder to win than fear." The words struck deeper than weapons. The enforcers exchanged uneasy glances. They had been trained to enforce control, not to debate ideals. This human spoke with clarity, shaping arguments that twisted their mission into a mark of shame. Lyra's eyes widened as she listened. She had begged them before, offering herself, crying for mercy, but her words had fallen on deaf ears. Yet Tomasz spoke, and the enforcers shifted uncomfortably, unsettled by the weight of his reasoning. She realized in that moment that humans did not only fight with strength. They also fought with words, and those words could pierce armor just as deeply as blades. The lead enforcer finally replied, his tone sharp. "We are not here to seek respect. We are here to fulfill our task. You cannot stop us with speeches." Tomasz did not step back. "Then let us make a bargain. You want something, and you believe you have the right to take it. But I know the universe does not work that way. If you take by force, you will face consequences. If you leave now, I will make sure this encounter is not reported. You can return to your masters without shame. Walk away, and you will keep what dignity remains." The enforcers froze, surprised by the offer. For the first time, Tomasz gave them a path that did not end in violence. A path where they could leave without failure written on their names. The leader frowned. And if we refuse? Tamash's eyes sharpened. Then you will face me. And you may win, but when my patrol learns what you have done, when humanity learns that you take children, your masters will face questions they cannot silence. Choose carefully. A bargain now is wiser than a battle later. The corridor rang with silence again. The enforcers whispered among themselves. Tamash stood tall, unshaken, letting the weight of his words settle. Lyra held her breath, her heart racing. Her daughter clutched her tighter, whispering softly, "Mama, will they go?" Lyra brushed the child's hair with a trembling hand. "Stay quiet, little one. Listen." The leader of the enforcers finally turned back to Tamash. His voice was slower, heavier with thought. "You speak of bargains, human. But why should we trust your word?" Tamash took a single step forward, his voice steady. "Because I am human. And when a human gives a word, it is not broken lightly. You know this. Across the stars, humanity is known for keeping promises, even when it costs us. That is why you fear us, even if you will not admit it." The leader paused. The others shifted, clearly uneasy. The reputation of humanity was indeed known: persistent, stubborn, unwilling to let go once a line was drawn. Tamash was not lying. His kind would not ignore this if word spread. Lyra felt her heart stir with something she had not felt in days: real hope. She saw the enforcers falter, their confidence shaken not by weapons but by the truth in Tamash's voice. She whispered to her daughter, "Do you see? He does not only protect us. He changes their hearts." The child looked up, eyes wide, not fully understanding but sensing the shift in the air. Tamash stood silently, giving the enforcers time to choose. His stance was calm, yet the firmness of his posture reminded them he would not yield. Finally, the leader lowered his weapon slightly, though not fully. His tone was cautious. "You are clever, human. You have given us a choice. We will consider your words, but know this: our masters will not be so easily swayed." Tamash nodded once. "Then let them hear my words through you. Carry the message that not every life is yours to take. Carry the message that humanity will not look away." The leader gave a curt signal, and the enforcers stepped back a few paces. They were not retreating fully, but the pressure had eased. For the first time since the ship was boarded, Lyra felt air fill her lungs without the sting of terror. Her daughter tugged gently at her sleeve and whispered, "Mama, he made them stop." Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Yes, my light. He made them stop." Tamash turned slightly, just enough to glance at them. His face softened, his voice quiet but warm. "Stay strong. This is not over yet, but you are not alone anymore." And in that moment, the alien mother realized what made humans different. They did not only resist with strength. They bargained with conviction. They spoke truths that others could not ignore. And through those truths, they created hope where none had existed before. The corridor lights flickered weakly as the damaged ship groaned under the weight of the docking clamps. The air smelled faintly of burnt wires, and sparks jumped now and then from broken panels. In that tense moment, Tamash stood tall, still blocking the enforcers from reaching the mother and her child. The bargain had slowed the intruders, but it had not ended the threat. Tamash knew their hesitation was temporary. Once their masters pressed for results, they would return with sharper orders and less patience. If Lyra and her daughter remained on this vessel, their safety would not last. He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting Lyra's. His voice was steady but softer now. "We need to move. Staying here will only trap us." Lyra nodded quickly, clutching her daughter's hand. The child looked frightened but obeyed her mother without question. Tomasz signaled them to stay close as he slowly stepped back from the enforcers, keeping his gaze locked on their leader. The lead enforcer did not raise his weapon this time. Instead, he tilted his head, as though curious. "You cannot run forever, human. This ship is damaged. Where will you hide?" Tomasz gave no answer. His silence was deliberate, a message that he would not reveal his plan. With careful steps, he guided Lyra and her daughter toward a side corridor, never turning his back on the group. Only when they were far enough did he quicken his pace, urging the mother and child to follow closely. The halls of the transport were dim and narrow, scattered with debris from earlier impacts. Panels hung loose, wires dangled, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. The child stumbled once, but Tomasz reached out, steadying her gently. His touch was firm yet kind, and the little girl looked up at him with quiet trust. "Stay close to me," he said calmly. "I know the way." Lyra whispered breathlessly, "How do you know this ship?" Tomasz pointed toward a faintly glowing map etched into the wall. "Transport designs are similar across many fleets. I studied them during training. The docking bay is ahead, but we need to reach the maintenance tunnels first. They will slow the enforcers." They moved quickly, the sound of distant footsteps echoing behind them. The enforcers had begun to follow, their heavy boots striking the metal floor like drums of pursuit. Lyra's heart raced with every step, but Tomasz's calm presence pushed her forward. At the first intersection, Tomasz stopped at a control panel. He tapped a few commands with skilled fingers. Sparks flew as the system responded sluggishly. With a low rumble, a bulkhead door sealed behind them, cutting off the main corridor. "That will delay them," Tomasz said firmly. "Not for long, but long enough." The child squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "Mama, will they find us again?" Lyra bent down, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We are with him now. He knows what to do." Tomasz glanced at them, his voice low but strong. "I promise I will not let them take you." They hurried down another passage, the dim lights guiding them toward the lower decks. The ship creaked with age, and every step carried the weight of urgency. Lyra's breath came fast, her arms aching from holding her daughter close, yet she refused to let go. Soon they reached a narrow hatch. Tomasz pulled it open, revealing a dark maintenance tunnel lined with pipes and cables. The air was warmer here, the sound of steam hissing faintly in the distance. He motioned for them to enter first. "This way. They won't expect us to use these paths," he explained. Lyra hesitated, staring into the darkness. "Will it be safe?" "As safe as we can make it," Tomasz answered. "Trust me." She nodded and stepped inside, guiding her daughter carefully. Tomasz followed, pulling the hatch shut behind them. The tunnel was cramped, forcing them to walk single file. The child clung to her mother, whispering, "It is dark, Mama." Tomasz's voice came from behind them, calm and reassuring. "Do not be afraid of the dark. The dark cannot hurt you. And I am right here." The girl's breathing slowed at his words. Even in the shadows, his steady tone gave her comfort. As they moved deeper, Tomasz paused again at a junction box. He pulled a small tool from his belt and quickly rewired a connection. Moments later, the lights in the tunnel flickered weakly to life, casting a pale glow that revealed the narrow path ahead. "There," he said. "Better than walking blind." They pressed forward, the ship groaning above them as the enforcers searched the main decks. Tomasz listened carefully, always alert to the sounds around them. He guided them with confidence, turning corners and passing through hatches as though the maze were already mapped in his mind. Finally, after what felt like endless twists, they reached a wider chamber where a ladder stretched upward. At the top, a faint glow hinted at another section of the ship. Tomasz looked up, then turned to Lyra. "This will take us closer to the docking bay," he explained. "Once we reach it, I can get us to my patrol ship. But we must move quickly. They will try to cut us off." Lyra nodded, lifting her daughter carefully. Tomasz climbed first, then reached down to help pull the child upward. His hands were steady, his movements precise, making sure she felt secure. When the girl reached the top, she looked down at him with a small, brave smile. "You are not afraid," she whispered. Tomasz gave her a faint smile in return. "Sometimes being brave means standing even when you are afraid." Lyra climbed after her, and Tomasz closed the hatch once more. They entered another corridor, this one wider but filled with smoke from damaged vents. The air was thick, and Lyra coughed lightly, covering her daughter's face with her sleeve. Tomasz moved ahead, checking each corner before signaling them to follow. The footsteps of the enforcers echoed faintly again, growing closer. They were relentless, unwilling to give up the chase. At the final stretch before the docking bay, Tomasz stopped at another control panel. He typed rapidly, rerouting power through emergency circuits. A deep rumble filled the hall as another bulkhead door slammed shut behind them, sealing the path. "That buys us more time," he said firmly. "We are almost there." Lyra felt tears prick her eyes as relief mixed with fear. She looked down at her daughter, who leaned against her shoulder, tired but still holding on. Then she looked at Tomasz, his back straight, his movements careful, his focus unshaken. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Why does he help us so much?" Her daughter answered in a small, drowsy voice, "Because he is human, Mama." Lyra paused, her heart tightening at the simple truth in those words. She realized her child was right. This human had no reason to risk his life for them, yet he did. His choice was not born from duty alone but from something deeper. They reached the final hatch before the docking bay. Tomasz placed his hand on the control, then turned to them with calm eyes. "Stay close. From here, every second matters. But we will make it. Do you believe me?" Lyra met his gaze, then nodded. "Yes. We believe you." The child whispered softly, "We trust you." With that, Tomasz opened the hatch, and the escape began in earnest. The hatch opened with a heavy hiss, and the three of them stepped into a quieter section of the ship. The docking bay was still ahead, but for the moment they were safe from the sound of pursuing boots. The corridor here was brighter, lined with storage crates and flickering lights. The hum of the engines was faint, like a tired heartbeat. Tomasz guided Lyra and her daughter into a small service room off the main path. He closed the door carefully, then checked the control panel to make sure it would lock behind them. The room was cramped, filled with tools, wires, and old supply containers. It was not much, but it gave them a brief moment to breathe. The little girl leaned against her mother's chest, her small hands gripping tightly. She was tired, her eyelids heavy from the stress of running. Lyra stroked her daughter's hair gently, whispering soft words of comfort. Tomasz watched them for a moment, then crouched near the opposite wall. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He knew they had little time before the enforcers found another way around the sealed doors. He also knew something deeper was happening here. These enforcers were not chasing them for a simple reason. There was a purpose behind their mission, and he needed to understand it. He turned his gaze to Lyra. They are determined to take her. Why? What is it they want from your daughter? Lyra's eyes flickered with fear. She looked down at her child, then back at Tomasz. Her voice was low, filled with hesitation. You should not be here. If you knew the truth, you would understand why they cannot stop. Tomasz shook his head slowly. I chose to be here. I cannot protect her if I do not know the reason. Trust me with the truth. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Lyra's eyes were full of conflict. She had carried this burden alone, shielding her daughter from every question, every danger. To share it now felt both terrifying and freeing. At last, she drew a deep breath. She is not like other children, Lyra whispered. Since her birth, there has been a mark upon her. My people call it the sign of the ancient flow. Some fear it. Others desire it. It is said that children with this gift are connected to a force older than the stars themselves. Tomasz listened intently, his brow furrowed. A force older than the stars. Lyra nodded slowly. Energy that cannot be explained. It gives them visions, sometimes strength, sometimes knowledge beyond their years. My daughter is too young to understand it, yet the mark is clear. The enforcers know. They were sent to claim her, to shape her, to use her. They believe she will serve their cause if taken young. The child stirred faintly, opening her eyes at her mother's voice. She looked up, confused. Mama, are they coming for me because of the light? Lyra kissed her forehead softly. Yes, my light. But you are more than what they see. You are mine. Tomasz's jaw tightened. He had suspected the child was special, but not to this extent. Now he understood the urgency of the chase, and also the weight carried by the mother. He looked at the girl, then back at Lyra. Does she suffer from it? He asked gently. Lyra shook her head. No. She laughs, she plays, she dreams like any child. But sometimes she speaks of things she should not know. Places she has never seen. Events she could not have learned. She is still innocent, but the gift grows stronger with every day. The little girl blinked, then whispered, I saw the stars dance last night. They were singing. Lyra's eyes softened, but she looked worried. Do you see? She cannot help it. These visions will only grow. That is why they will never stop. They want to control what she carries. Tomasz leaned back against the wall, processing the truth. His voice was quiet but firm. Then we cannot let them have her. A gift is not meant to be stolen. It is hers, not theirs. Lyra stared at him, surprised by his certainty. You believe me? Yes, Tomasz replied simply. I believe you. And I believe her. He glanced at the child, whose eyes glimmered with innocence and something far older. The girl tilted her head curiously. Why do you help us, human? Tomasz met her gaze, his expression softening. Because you are a child, and children deserve to be free to grow. Because your mother loves you more than her own life. And because no one should decide your fate but you. The little girl smiled faintly, her fear easing. She leaned against her mother again, comforted by his words. Lyra's throat tightened. She had carried her secret with silence, hiding from those who hunted her. Now, in this small room, a human she had only just met spoke with more faith in her child than many of her own people ever had. She whispered, "I thought no one would understand. I thought I was alone." Tomasz shook his head. "You are not alone anymore. Humanity has seen darkness before, and we know what it means to protect the future. Your daughter is part of that future, and we will not let it be stolen." The hum of footsteps echoed faintly through the walls, breaking the quiet moment. The enforcers were still searching. Their time in the room was running short. Tomasz stood, his hand brushing the dust from his uniform. "They will find us soon," he said calmly. "But now I know why we run. And knowing changes everything. I will not let them take her." Lyra rose to her feet, holding her daughter close. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "Then I will follow you. Wherever you lead, I will follow." The child lifted her head again, her small voice clear. "And I will be brave." Tomasz gave a faint smile. "That is all I ask." He unlocked the door quietly and peered into the corridor. The lights flickered, shadows dancing along the walls. Somewhere in the distance, the heavy steps of the enforcers echoed closer. Tomasz turned back to them, his voice low but full of resolve. "Stay close. We move together. We carry the truth now, and that truth will guide us." Lyra held her daughter tightly, her heart steady with new strength. She no longer felt only fear. She felt the power of hope, the strength of standing beside someone who believed. The three of them stepped out into the dim corridor once more, ready to face whatever came next. The corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel of shadows, broken by blinking lights. Tomasz walked at the front, his steps quiet but steady. Behind him, Lyra held her daughter close, her arms firm, her heart pounding. Every sound seemed louder in the silence, every flicker of light sharper. The enforcers were close, and there was no turning back now. Tomasz moved with purpose. He had been through dangerous paths before, but this was different. This was not only about survival. This was about protecting something pure, something the enforcers would twist if they could. He kept his voice low as he spoke back to them. "Stay behind me. Do not let go of each other." Lyra nodded, her eyes locked on his back. The child rested her head against her mother's shoulder, too weary to walk but listening to every sound. Soon the corridor opened into a wide chamber. It was one of the final halls before the docking bay. The chamber was empty except for old crates and broken machinery, but the open space meant less cover. Tomasz scanned quickly, then motioned them forward. But before they could move far, a loud metallic thud echoed from behind. A door slid open, and enforcers stepped through. Their boots struck the floor in unison, their voices cold and commanding. "Hand over the child." Lyra's breath caught. She clutched her daughter tightly, whispering soft words of courage. The little one stirred, opening her eyes wide, fear and confusion mixing together. Tomasz stepped forward, placing himself between them and the enforcers. His posture was firm, his shoulders squared. He did not raise a weapon, but his presence alone carried weight. His voice was steady, carrying across the chamber. "You will not take her." The leader of the enforcers stepped out from the group. His armor gleamed under the flickering lights, his mask reflecting Tomasz's calm stare. "This does not concern you, human. Move aside." Tomasz did not move. "It does concern me. She is a child, and no one has the right to steal her future. If you want her, you will have to face more than a frightened mother. You will have to face humanity's promise." The enforcers hesitated. They were trained for control, for fear, but Tamash's words carried something different. He spoke not as one soldier, but as a voice of principle. His defiance was more than resistance. It was a reminder of something greater. Lyra watched with wide eyes. Her heart trembled, but she felt strength rising in her chest. She had begged for mercy before, willing to sacrifice herself for her daughter. But now, standing behind this human, she felt the weight of a new choice. It was not only about sacrifice. It was about standing together, refusing to bend. The enforcers moved closer, their steps echoing. Tamash raised his voice again, sharp and clear. You know what you are doing is wrong. You know a child is not a tool. Walk away, and remember that you were given the chance to choose the right path. The leader tilted his head, his mask hiding his expression. He gave a signal, and the group spread into the chamber. Their shadows stretched across the walls. Tamash glanced back at Lyra and her daughter. His face was calm, but his eyes held determination. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, stay strong. The little girl lifted her head. Her eyes shimmered faintly, a light of innocence mixed with something ancient. She whispered, They do not understand. They are afraid of me. Lyra hushed her gently, pressing her close. But Tamash heard the words, and he understood. The enforcers were not only after power. They were driven by fear of what they could not control. Taking a deep breath, Tamash faced them once more. You fear what you do not understand. But fear does not give you the right to destroy. Humanity has learned this lesson through fire and loss, and we will not watch you repeat it. The leader hesitated, but then his voice grew harsher. You cannot stop us. Tamash took a step forward, his voice rising with iron resolve. I can. And I will. Because she is not alone. Her mother is with her. And I am with her. And if one human standing here is not enough, know this others will follow. Humanity will not stay silent. We stand when hope is needed, and we will not step aside. The chamber filled with silence. The enforcers paused, their weapons still in their hands, but their movements slowed. His words unsettled them. Not because of force, but because of truth. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She had never seen anyone face such danger with nothing but words and will. Her heart swelled with gratitude and awe. She whispered softly to her daughter, Look at him. Remember this moment. This is what it means to stand for life. The little girl looked at Tamash with wide eyes, her fear fading into wonder. She whispered, He is not afraid. Tamash heard her, and though his heart beat fast, he let a faint smile touch his lips. I am human. Fear does not rule me. The leader of the enforcers lifted his hand as if to give another order, but before he could, the sound of engines rumbled through the ship. A signal echoed across the chamber. Human reinforcements had arrived. Through the far entrance, more figures appeared, uniforms marked with the insignia of Tamash's patrol. They moved with precision, their presence strong. The enforcers froze, caught between retreat and defiance. Tamash did not look away. He held his ground, his voice low but final. This is the last time I ask. Leave the child. Leave the mother. Leave this place. For a tense moment, silence ruled the chamber. Then, with a sharp motion, the leader of the enforcers signaled his group. They stepped back, their boots echoing as they withdrew into the corridor they had come from. The weight in the chamber lifted, though the air still trembled with tension. Lyra exhaled shakily, holding her daughter close. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of relief. Tomasz turned to them, his calm returning. "It is over for now. You are safe." The little girl reached out her hand toward him. "Thank you," she whispered. Tomasz knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Do not thank me. Just remember that your life is yours, not theirs. Hold on to it, no matter what anyone says." She nodded softly, her small fingers gripping his hand for a moment before resting again in her mother's arms. Lyra's voice was unsteady but strong. "You gave us more than safety. You gave us hope. I will never forget this." Tomasz stood, glancing toward the docking bay. The reinforcements were securing the area, but he knew the threat was not gone forever. Still, for this moment, they had won. He looked back at them, his voice calm. "This was not only my choice. It was ours. You chose to keep moving forward. You chose to protect her. That is the power they cannot take." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with strength she had not felt before. She held her daughter tighter, not in fear, but in pride. And together, they stepped forward toward the waiting ships, toward safety, carrying with them the memory of the final choice made in the shadows of a broken corridor. The docking bay was wide and filled with echoes of engines and voices. Human patrol officers moved across the floor, checking controls and securing the area. The sharp tension of battle was fading, replaced by the steady rhythm of order. Tomasz walked at the front, leading Lyra and her daughter into the bright space. The little girl blinked at the lights, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. She was exhausted, but her eyes still held the quiet spark of curiosity that never left her. One of the human officers approached quickly, his voice respectful. "Commander Tomasz, we secured the perimeter. The enforcers have withdrawn. Scanners show no immediate threat." Tomasz nodded firmly. "Good. Keep watch. They may return, but not tonight." The officer saluted and moved on. Lyra held her daughter tighter, still looking around with caution. The sight of so many humans, all working together, filled her with both awe and confusion. She had heard stories of humans, but this was the first time she had seen their unity with her own eyes. Tomasz guided them toward a quieter corner of the bay, away from the noise. He turned to face them, his voice calm. "You are safe now. The patrol will take you to a secure station. From there, we can decide the best path forward." Lyra's eyes glistened with gratitude. "I do not know how to thank you. I thought no one would stand with us. And yet, here you are." Tomasz shook his head lightly. "You do not owe me thanks. Humanity has always stood for something greater than itself. Protecting a child, protecting the future, that is what makes us human." The little girl raised her head, her small voice soft but clear. "You stood for me." Tomasz knelt down, his eyes meeting hers. "Yes. And one day, when you are older, you will stand for someone else. That is how we carry hope forward." The child's lips curved into a faint smile. She reached out and touched his hand gently, as if to promise she understood. Lyra's heart ached at the sight. For so long she had felt alone, hiding her daughter's gift, fearing what others would do if they found out. Now, a stranger had risked everything for them. A human had given her back the strength she thought she had lost. Tomasz stood again, glancing toward the patrol ships. "We cannot stay here long. The enforcers may regroup. We must move quickly." As they walked toward the waiting transport, Lyra whispered softly, "Why did you help us? You had no reason." We are not of your kind. Tamash's answer was simple, but it carried weight. Because kindness is not limited to kind. Humanity learned long ago that the measure of who we are is not in protecting only our own, but in protecting those who cannot stand alone. His words sank into her heart like light in darkness. She held her daughter tighter, feeling not only safe but also seen. The patrol ship's ramp lowered with a hiss. Inside, the lights were warm, and the air carried the scent of clean metal. Tamash gestured for them to enter first. Lyra stepped up slowly, her daughter clutching her hand. As they settled into the seats, the little girl leaned against her mother, her eyes heavy with sleep. She whispered, "Mama, the stars are singing again." Lyra brushed her hair back gently. "Rest now, my light. You are safe." Tamash sat across from them, silent for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. He wondered about the visions the child carried. He wondered about the force that flowed through her, older than stars, greater than fear. But more than that, he wondered about the courage she would one day grow into. The engines of the ship rumbled as the patrol prepared for departure. Outside the window, the docking bay lights glowed, fading into the vast black of space. Lyra spoke again, her voice soft. "What will happen now? They will not stop hunting us." Tamash met her gaze. "Then we will not stop protecting you. Humanity has stood against storms before. We do not run from shadows." Her eyes filled with tears once more, but this time they were not only tears of fear. They were tears of hope. She whispered, "Perhaps one day, my daughter will see a world where she does not have to hide." "She will," Tamash said firmly. "Because people like you choose to fight for her. Because people like me choose to stand beside you. And because one day, she herself will choose to stand. That is the legacy we leave behind." The little girl stirred again, half dreaming, her voice faint. "I will stand. I promise." Both Tamash and Lyra looked at her, their hearts heavy with emotion. Tamash smiled faintly, his voice soft. "Then the future is already brighter." The ship lifted, engines humming as it soared into space. Stars spread across the view, endless and brilliant. The child opened her eyes just enough to look at them, her lips curving into a sleepy smile. "The stars are singing louder now." Tamash leaned back, his gaze steady on the stars. "They are singing because you are free." For a long time, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of engines. But it was not a heavy silence. It was the silence of safety, of a new beginning. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, resting her head against the seat. She thought of the journey behind them, the fear, the chase, the moments where hope almost died. And then she thought of Tamash, standing between them and the enforcers, his voice steady, his heart unshaken. She knew she would never forget that image. The little girl drifted into sleep, her breathing calm. Her small hand rested against her mother's chest, and Lyra covered it gently with her own. Tamash sat quietly, watching over them. In his mind, he knew their journey was far from over. The enforcers would not give up easily. But he also knew something more important. He knew that the child was not only special because of her gift. She was special because she represented the very thing humanity believed in: the power of life, the promise of tomorrow. As the stars stretched before them, Tamash thought of the stories that would one day be told. Not of battles or victories, but of choices made in quiet halls, of a mother's courage, of a child's innocence, and of a human who refused to stand aside. That was the true legacy of humanity. Not strength alone, not knowledge alone, but the choice to protect what mattered most, even when the galaxy turned cold. And as the patrol ship carried them into the vast unknown, that legacy grew stronger, carried now in the heart of a child who would one day remember that when all seemed lost, a human had stood and said, "You are worth protecting."